Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Bi-Weekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
Here. Welcome to our July Conservation Commission meeting. We'll introduce ourselves, starting on my right, working our way around.
Sure thing. I am Connor Madison.
Major Kopp, I'm the chair.
Trevor Matera.
Valerie Fanger.
Keith Whitehouse.
This is Keith's first meeting, so welcome, Keith.
Nice to meet you,
to
Keith.
him, please.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you. We still have 2 other open positions for anyone listening out there, or anyone who knows anyone. Please sign up. We need more new energy on this commission, as we're a little light tonight, but we're strong in the people we have here. So, and lastly but not leastly,
Kristen Murphy, Conservation and Sustainability.
Okay, is there anyone here for a public comment that's not associated with one of the agenda items? Yes. Please stand up and introduce yourself.
Ann Smith, 31 Chestnut Street. I thought this was a meeting about the sewer.
Okay, you
Where
are in
is
the
that?
wrong location.
Where is that?
There is another meeting. It's in the town hall. It's a few degrees warmer
Old
across
town
the
hall.
street. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the town office.
I'm sorry. Have a good meeting.
You too.
Yeah, we thought that might happen, so. Okay, so our first item is a drinking water trust fund grant application for conservation land. I believe we have Dwayne Hyde and Lynette here. Do you guys want to come up and introduce the topic?
Hello, My name is Lynette Batt. I'm a project manager with the organization Trust for Public Land, and I'm here with Dwayne Hyde of CELT, who I am sure many of you know. He's with the Southeast Land Trust, and we're here to talk about a potential project for conserving about 148 acres of land known as the Rugg property. And so this property is about 101 acres in Newfields and about 47 acres in Exeter. And so what we wanted to talk to you tonight about is a upcoming grant application, but kind of bigger picture to describe the project. So you all got the packet, I hope, and had a chance to look at the description of the project, the timeline. And again, this is very much at the beginning phases. So this is the first that I've talked to you about the project, so I want to kind of give a broad brush overview. And actually, I should probably back up and describe my role. So I'm a project manager with Trust for Public Land. We are a national nonprofit organization that helps to conserve land for people and for public benefit. Dwayne brought us into this project about 6 months ago to consider this property for potential conservation. So our role is very much as a facilitator and a project manager of a potential real estate acquisition project, and we'd be working with local partners like the town of Exeter, the town of Newfields, and CELT to see it through to fruition. So our role is really kind of fundraising and bringing together kind of the technical details of the acquisition project, some of the real estate transaction components. So where we are now is the Rugg family is very interested in selling the land for conservation. They do have a development plan, a conceptual development plan that they've put together for the property that shows 67 lots in the town of Newfields, not including lots in the town of Exeter, but the town of Exeter portion would be supportive of that Newfields development as kind of open space land to the development. So what they would rather do than develop the property is to see it conserved. And so they've been working with CELT for many years on plans to conserve it, and then with us over the last 6 months. And so we have been talking to the town of Newfields, and we would like to continue those conversations with the town of Exeter to see if there's interest in for Exeter to purchase the Exeter portion, which again is about 46 acres. And where we are now is we've submitted pre-applications for several grants to various state, right now just to state agencies for the Newfields portion. We have an upcoming grant application opportunity, a pre-application that's non-committal, non-binding to the town. For $500,000 would be the maximum that we could apply to for the Exeter portion of this acquisition. So we do have an appraisal on the property. Those numbers are in your packet. That appraisal is for the full 148 acres. And then we have kind of an allocated value of that appraisal to the Exeter portion and to the Newfields portion. And so this is, again, the beginning of many conversations that we'll have with the town to see is the town interested in purchasing this for conservation? If so, working out the budget. But right now what we've determined is that one of the grants that we've identified that would be appropriate for the project could apply to the Exeter portion, and the other grants that we've identified would apply to the Newfields portion. And so the grant that we're talking about tonight and that we would love your support on is the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. That's the New Hampshire DES, Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. And the reason that that's applicable to this property is it is in a public wellhead area, a water supply protection area for two public drinking water wells. And so we'd like to move forward with those grants. And again, the next steps would be to continue the conversation with the town, to talk to the select board about the acquisition. I do want to mention there are some boundary and title issues that are currently being resolved. You may or may not be familiar with that, but Kristen could speak to that a little bit more. So the landowners have put together a quite detailed title report and title investigation that's been going on for years and survey, and there's an active process going on now with the planning department to kind of clear up title. So that would have to happen before any conservation acquisition. So that's kind of an overview of the project. The timeline that we're looking at is these grant pre-applications that we're doing now through the fall. Then we'd be, well, now into the fall, for full applications, we would continue the fundraising and public outreach process through next year. We are hoping that the towns would vote on a town bond, and a big part of this funding source that would be needed to contemplate the project is a town bond from Exeter for your portion. And hopefully that vote would happen next March at the town meeting. So lots of steps needed to get to that place. So this is kind of an initial look at the project and commitment of support from Exeter in terms of your interest from a conservation standpoint.
And I know you all have it in your packet, but I can pull up the map if you want online or.
That might be helpful, yeah. While she's getting that, any initial questions?
Does anyone have any initial? I mean, I was part of an earlier discussion on this. I'm familiar with the site and the property. This is an important area as it abuts the town forest.
Yeah, and I neglected to mention all the conservation values, so I'm sure you all are very familiar with this property, and it has existing trails. There's already a lot of public use on it. We've mapped out about 12, 13 miles of trails on both portions. I'm not sure exactly how that divides up between Newfields and Exeter, but it's in the packet. There is also, not related to the Exeter portion, but just so you know, kind of a phase 2 for this project is conceived to create a new parking area off Piscassic Road, kind of on the northernmost purple spur there. So that would kind of be an enhancement of public access to the overall property. So 2 different transactions, a Newfields transaction, Exeter transaction. The timing of that we're still working out. They would be codependent, likely to be codependent on each other and kind of roughly on the same timelines. And I didn't finish my timeline description, so we're thinking to close within the first half of 2025. So this year and next year, fundraising, public support, we'll be doing additional community meetings and public meetings, and then ideally close on the property in the first half of 2025.
So I know there's a lot of moving parts to this project. So first of all, good on you all for being able to manage all of this. How do all of these grants sort of fit into this, the ongoing boundary issue discussions, and like how does that all sort of work in tandem?
That's a great question. So the boundary issues and the title will need to be worked out for us to submit full applications to the grants this fall. Really, it's kind of part of the overall due diligence process, and the real answer is everything needs to be buttoned up before the agencies review the package, not necessarily before the grant applications are submitted, but because this has kind of been an ongoing question, we want to make sure we're really clear on that path for boundary resolution, or that we have achieved the resolution of the boundary question before we go ahead and submit full applications. So in the next 1 to 2 months is what we talked about earlier as being the goal time frame to resolve the boundary and title question.
Right, and so just from the town's perspective, the Ruggs had approached the town multiple times. Dave Sharples said, we really need to see some title research to indicate why you believe this is your property. They hired Don Wilson, thank you. They hired Don Wilson, who has surveyed all sorts of portions of this town, all sorts of land in this portion of town, including for the Conservation Commission ages ago. Today they presented kind of a summary title report to the town, updated survey plans. They did a tremendous amount of field work and were able to document all of the locations that survey markers, that property boundaries were bound by in the field. So they feel pretty confident in their work. The next step is for the town to receive that, review it, have legal counsel take a look, and then we'll go from there.
Right.
Do you think you'll be able to get any other funding sources for Exeter besides
Kristen, can we scroll up to the budget? Sorry to. So we are looking at a package of grants. We've identified 4 grants that are, well, 3 grants that are likely to be good fits and 1 that's still a question mark. And so in this packet, the proposed funding sources is really like our best look at scouring all the, with a lot of experience in, you know, what conservation grants are fit, state and federal grants that are potential. Because, so it roughly works out to about 2/3, 1/3 as far as the cost. So we thought one of the 3 most likely grants to apply to the Exeter portion and 2 to apply to the Newfields portion. So this is likely to be the maximum that we can find from a public, well, from a state and federal public funding standpoint, yeah. So if you look at the bottom half of the table is what we've estimated right now for Exeter, and this is just to acquire the land.
Right.
There's of course associated project costs, and that's part of what my job is to fundraise for those associated project costs and some of the stewardship costs. But right now we're looking at about 1.14 million would be the ask from Exeter as a conservation bond, and 500,000 is what we think we can bring in through the drinking water grant.
And any private donors?
The private donations would probably be going to support project costs, due diligence costs. We have to finish the title work, survey, appraisals. That's all pretty big price tags and tends to soak up most of the private dollars that we're able to fundraise, yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? And this is, so regarding the appraisal, we actually got a really fairly rigorous appraisal. This appraisal was done to federal Yellow Book standards, and that would be required if we do get the federal source of funding that we're hoping to get, 1 or 2 federal sources of funding. And so we went ahead and did the rigorous appraisal up front that we hope will be supportive next year. We'll need to do an update to that appraisal, but hopefully the numbers won't change much, if at all.
Yeah, I guess it's a pretty big number. It's a pretty big ask for us. We've, just for your understanding, we've been trying to raise money in our conservation fund to support land acquisition projects. I guess the last 2 years we've put in and received from the town $50,000 each year. Some of that money has already been earmarked for other things. And that may affect something like this. Is we need to start talking about it and planning it, because it may.
And we are looking at this as a bond, and so that's a much longer discussion and process with the town and with the voters to work towards that and see if that is of interest and capacity within the town. So as a comparison, Newfields passed a $2 million bond in 2006 to do the Piscassic Greenways project, and they're just at the tail end of paying off that bond. I think it gets paid off in 2024. So it would be a similar conservation bond measure that we'd be looking towards, not straight budgeting it from the annual budget.
Annual year. Yeah. That makes sense.
Dwayne, anything you would like to add to this? Okay.
I know Toby is here from the Fort Rock Riders, who's lurking in the outskirts of our room here, and I know this land, it has value as a wellhead protection area for the Forest Ridge community and their drinking water supplies. It has high recreational value. It has modest ecological value as well, but there are a lot of trails on it in terms of wildlife. That's one issue we've been dealing with, is trail density and impacts from trail uses. So that's an ongoing discussion we have, is how many trails are too many, and I think we've done a pretty good job working with Fort Rock Riders and the mountain biking community to balance the quality of trails and the location of trails out there. Obviously, that's in our controlled area. This would expand the reach of the town-owned property, and I guess I'm imagining that the mountain biking community is very interested in this, and I don't know what's being done to engage them or if they have comments about any of this. So
Yeah,
that's
so-
sort of a broad question. Comment.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the management planning is a critical part of this, and Fort Rock Riders has been, as you guys know, an incredible supporter of and maintainer and builder of the trails that are on the property now with permission from the private landowners, from the Ruggs. So definitely the plan is to continue to work with Fort Rock Riders, continue those discussions, get a plan for what the future looks like. And an element of this project that I haven't touched on yet, a big element of this project, is we're conceiving of this as a community forest, at least on the Newfields portion and potentially both sides, depending on the interest of the towns to work together towards that. And so a community forest, and one of the funding sources is the U.S. Forest Service Community Forest Program. And so community forests would be getting open public input, from residents and non-residents, any members of the public that are interested in weighing in through a series of public meetings that help inform kind of the long-term management of the property. So we would be putting, after those public meetings, and then we'd also be engaging resource professionals to put together a community forest management plan for the property. That is, again, at least the Newfields portion, because the community forest program funding, we're planning to go towards the Newfield side. But given that the trails right now are, a system, and we're looking at this project as a whole project, we'd at least like to have the conversation about whether it makes sense to do a community forest plan, management plan for the whole property, including the Exeter portion, and exactly where that plan should end and the Oakland's town forest planning starts. So that's a broader discussion to have, but a management plan and those long-term management elements are definitely part of what we'll be doing over the next year and a half.
Okay.
Did that help answer your question?
Yeah, that did. So I guess for tonight, I mean, the main point tonight is your ask tonight is a letter of support.
Yeah, letter of support for this next grant. Preliminary, this is a pre-application for the grant.
I am in support of that, and I would motion that we issue you a letter.
You want to ask for public comment first?
Before we do that, though, let's ask for public comment or the other thing. Or any other comments from the commission. Certainly we can discuss the memo. Okay. All right, so I'm motioning that we send a letter in support. And we provide that to you? Would you like us to provide that to you? Or
I think it would be good to direct it to the state
director?
DES, so I can give you the address and letterhead for that.
Yeah, they like it to be addressed to the state, but
Yeah.
it goes to Lynette and it's included in the package. They
Yeah.
don't want to get the letter separate.
That's
yeah.
what I meant.
Creates
Yeah.
chaos, so
Yeah. The letterhead will be to the state, but send it to me, I'll include it with the grant
Perfect.
application package. Yeah.
Okay.
And as a next step, I would love to propose,
Can we, hold on, let's
Oh,
just, I motion that. Can I second that?
Seconded.
Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor? You don't have to vote, Keith, if you don't want it. But
You're welcome to.
you are an alternate. Are you is he an alternate right now?
Yep.
But we normally would have up to 7 voting members. So since we're only at 5, you can vote or you can just abstain. Either way is fine. Okay. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? No. Okay, so the motion passes 5-0. Okay.
thank you. And next step, I would love to explore the idea of getting together for a site walk with the Newfields Conservation Commission, if that is of interest.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, I can follow up with Kristen on that. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving right along. Next we have a wetland dredge and fill application for the bank stabilization along the Exeter River at River Run at Exeter. That's a tongue twister. Paige Libby.
Yes, thank you. Paige Libby with Jones and Beach Engineers. Here on behalf of River Run Exeter. Some of you may know it as its former name, which was Exeter River Landing. It's the manufactured home park. It's now owned by Cobblestone Assets. So this park, and I think Kristen's going to pull the plans up, but they have substantial frontage along the Exeter River. Pretty much their whole southern border of the property runs along the Exeter River. So what we're here for tonight is we're applying for a dredge and fill permit through the state to do some bank stabilization along 3 areas of the river that have eroded. We were hired by the park really to address these 3 areas, which are their main priorities, but certainly the entire bank at some point will need to be evaluated just for making sure that, making sure that there are no areas in the future that are a concern. Perfect, thank you. So if you can see my mouse on the screen, the areas on this sheet of the plan, which is the first sheet, are circled and they're labeled as area 1, 2, and 3. And then on the next pages after that, they're kind of blown up details of each of those 3 areas. And Kristen has actually been super helpful because she knows more of the history of what's gone on here than I do, because I was recently brought on board within the last year or so. But basically these 3 areas have had actually water main failures, which caused the bank to fail. And so these have been sitting eroded for several years, some of them even longer, up to 10 years in some cases. And the new owner has taken it upon themselves to try and remedy the situation, which is why they brought us on board. So this is area 1, as we called it on the plan, and this actually had 2 units that were here previously that are no longer there. And when this bank failed, there were a couple of units that were actually hanging over the bank, and obviously had to be removed and have not been put back. So what we're proposing here is to stabilize the bank using a gabion basket system that's called Scour Lock, and then an erosion control fabric going up the bank. And those are just color-coded just for clarity on the plan because it was getting busy, so that's why it's labeled as blue and red on the plan. And then in this area, we actually proposed a path down to the river. That's something that has been important to the residents, so we tried to incorporate that. Kristen did mention the board may have some concerns about that, so that's something we're willing to discuss with you all tonight.
Can you point out where that is specifically?
Yeah, so, oops. Perfect. So this is the path that we're proposing, the area that's not colored in, essentially. So basically there would be a slope. It's almost like terraced. So that's what we've proposed. And then the blue would be the erosion control fabric, and the red is the gabion baskets, which will basically hold that section of slope in place that's right along the river, almost acting like a hard armoring, all the benefits of a hard armoring, but really a natural solution because it'd be filled in with soil and planted. And then if we go...
What are the plantings?
Actually, I don't know off the top of my head. It's a conservation seed mix, I believe.
So just...
I think we have a planting plan on sheet D1.
Not woody plants necessarily.
Correct, yeah. So something that'll act more as a buffer and basically fill that area back in, because there's really not a ton that's been able to grow back in that area recently. It's a lot of fallen trees and things like that. So I can keep going through each of the areas if that works, and then we can go back and go through questions after.
Okay, so that's area 1.
Yep. And then area 2 is this area, which is down on what I call the peninsula, and it's Camelot Road. So this is the area, if you're on the first sheet of the plan set, that's down in here.
Yep.
So this area is more like what we normally see with riverbank erosion, but actually Kristen mentioned this. This area also had a water main failure, but it's like undercutting of the bank, so the trees are kind of hanging over and the slope is just eroded underneath. And this area is very tricky for what we're proposing because there's really limited access. It's not wide open like the other areas are. This area, it's going to be really difficult for them to get in behind the units because the access between the units is quite narrow, as you can see here. And in a lot of them, there's actually sheds in between the units as well. And then some of the sheds and the backs of the units are like 6 feet from the bank. So just doing that work is going to be really tricky. So what
And you said they. Who's doing the work and with what equipment?
So they don't have a contractor or anything lined up yet. We're just in the planning stages. So
This hasn't been bid yet.
Correct, yep. We do have one contractor we reached out to get a bid so they can just get a better feel for the pricing of the project, but it's not decided or anything yet.
Okay.
But we talked about that with the facilities manager. They won't be doing this work, but they do a lot of their own work around the park already. So we kind of thought about that as we were doing the planning. So what we're proposing back here would be coir logs, just because they're easier to install, and then they'd be able to plant those as well. So hopefully the vegetation would grow back in that area. And then this area is very similar to the first one. This is area 3. Whoops. And this one's up here. So this unit is actually not there anymore. I think they have a new unit sitting there that's going somewhere else right now, but that unit was removed. So that area will be easier to access, similar to the first one, from the top of the bank. And so basically the same thing there. We're proposing the same thing as the area 1 in that spot. And again, that was due to a water main failure that Kristen actually has some pretty good pictures of. I did not have them at the time, so they're not included in the application. So that's pretty much it for an overview of the project. We did meet with DES on site before we put these plans together. So we talked about the design sort of with them. And we did attend the local advisory committee meeting a couple of weeks ago and discuss the project with them as well.
Did either of those meetings bring up any design changes that were provided to us, or?
No, so the meeting with DES, actually, we did that before we designed the project. So that kind of was what led us to our design, was discussion with them. And the local advisory committee didn't have any comments on the design. The only concern that they had was they were worried about stormwater management. So they're concerned that stormwater runoff could be contributing to the erosion that's happened, which we can understand. So that's something that I did bring up to the owner about doing a future study of the park and really getting a better understanding of what is going on with the stormwater. We don't think that that's what caused these 3 bank failures, just because some people know the history of what's happened, but certainly something to think about.
And your packet did have, in my memo portion of the packet, it did have comments from ERLAC included.
Yep.
They sent a memo to DES with the, so I quoted that language there. So Doug Eastman and I were on site for all 3 of these. The first one happened in '09, the second one, I want to say 2012, and then 2016 maybe for the third. All of the homes that were removed from the site are prohibited from being put back, so it's not like it's getting restored and homes reintroduced. But I'm happy to offer any insight from that. It was pretty harrowing to see, I'll be honest. You see these homes, with this huge bank slump underneath. But former grouping of these members of Conservation Commission did review a plan for restoration for Site 3. The former owner did want to install some riprap and some other stuff. It was presented. I can't remember if it just made technical review or if it made it to the Conservation Commission, but there were concerns about riprap and wanting a more natural approach, and so all of those plans were withdrawn, and that was in '09. That was when that site failed. So.
And the current owner is aware of the water main issues as well. So that's actually something we're also working on in tandem with this project, because they know that the infrastructure is dated and that's what's causing all of these failures. So it's been ongoing since they purchased the property and obviously before then as well.
There's a major water main replacement project, right? Is that
Sorry,
correct? There's a project to replace a lot of the water mains at the park. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's what we're working on. They have their own private water system.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. So we're working on that.
Yeah, it's great seeing the amount of green infrastructure that's going into this project, because like the first thing I think about, especially knowing that site and how steep those banks are, and just the undercutting, is the fact that, like, I would think, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, like the first instinct is like, yeah, put rock up. So seeing these, core logs going in, seeing this woody root wad stabilization, even the gabion baskets is refreshing. Do you feel like you have a lot of experience putting these green infrastructure projects in, that you sort of, looking at these designs, I see a lot going into them. I've seen, just in my professional work, have seen some of these going in. So I just wanted to get your opinions on some of them, knowing the different characteristics of each site.
Yeah, so we use them quite often, not as much on rivers. We've done, I think, a couple of river bank stabilization projects, but we do a lot in the lakes region. And we do a lot on the ocean, actually, as well.
Right.
Like on the Great Bay, we've done some, and they tend to work well. And DES also has been really kind of cracking down on their tiered approach to bank stabilization. So they don't want you to immediately go to riprap or like a retaining wall. They want you to do this first, and then if there's a reason you can't do that, move on to the next.
Scour Lock was actually one of the newer ones to me. I had to look that one up. Can you tell me about the material that's made of, those gabions?
Yeah, so it is similar to a regular gabion basket. So it's like a metal framing cube, almost like a 3x3 cube. But then there's a fabric that goes around it, a non-woven geotextile. So that helps hold everything in place, and so it can't like go through the holes of the metal. So it's similar to it in that way. But then it also has a pocket on the front of it. That you can fill with like an organic material, so that when the river water is running by it, it can really help to revegetate that.
And is that an exposed geotextile face on those in the case of where they would be going in site, 1 and 3, I think?
Let me switch to actually the detail plan. So this is a better detail of it. It's kind of small up in that upper left corner.
Yep.
So yeah, it's an exposed face, but then because of that pocket that's on the front side, and when you fill that in with the organic material, it's meant to really get revegetated. So at first it'll be exposed.
Oh, I see the water level. Yep.
Like there's literally like a pocket in the front that you fill soil, and then your grasses are growing out of it.
Yeah, and they can grow out through the front too.
And they can grow out through the front.
Yeah, so they can grow through the fabric, so that eventually the fabric won't be visible.
But it's not an it's not supposed to break down.
Correct. Yep.
What are the velocities like in that part of the river? Have you looked at like flooding, and like there's a lot that can go into these studies, river studies?
Yeah, we haven't done anything like that, just because we're really coming in at the last minute to basically fix what's there. Uh-huh. So it's not something where we're like, okay, let's study the velocity and basically stabilize what's not failed yet. We're just trying to fix what's there to make sure it doesn't fail again. We do have some of that stream data, though. We have the stream stats report and all of that. I think that was in the permit application. I don't know off the top of my head, though.
Probably was.
A couple more technical
questions. Yeah, they usually like to see that. Yeah, sure.
So are they going back to the scour locks too? So do those still allow the like land-water interface between them, so like the water can permeate those gabion baskets all the way to the other side of the baskets?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And moving to the site 2 with more of the core logs set up, those root wad wood buttresses, are those locally sourced or are those brought in? Do you know?
Yeah, those will be locally sourced, because those actually, they have a ton of fallen trees just all over the property that they've been dealing with, and they have trees that need to come down just for safety as well.
Okay, great.
So, and then there's also some that are like falling over into they're like still, the trees are still on the bank, not fallen into the river, that they'll need to remove to basically re-stabilize the bank, so they can use those trees as well.
Excellent.
So question, you show a photo, area 2, photo F, with the buildings. They're really close to the river.
They are.
And so after you do your work, is that going to change?
So I don't know exactly the goal of the owner, if they want to move those. I know
Okay.
that that's been talked about, like,
Okay.
why don't we just move them closer? But that obviously isn't a long-term solution. They
Okay.
need to do something about the bank either way.
Right. Okay.
So that I don't know. I don't know if they want to move the units closer to the road and do the bank stabilization, or if they're kind of trying to do one or the other. I
Okay.
think they would, if they can keep them where they are, that would be their preference, but
Right.
I don't exactly know.
Right, so when you stabilize it, it'll be pretty much where the current line is.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know what they're, that's not really what we're, it's a little beyond our scope, but it does
Right.
seem like an obvious recommendation that we should try and pull back from the river here a little bit.
Yeah, I think that would be the building inspector decision if he was to go out there. And certainly that has happened in the past with some of the units, you know, where they've been told they can't put them back in certain spots.
Yeah, I mean, the building inspector wouldn't be able to go there today and say you need to move that unless it was, imminent risk.
Okay.
That's just not his authority. He can't make someone move something unless there's a significant
A risk
issue.
factor.
Yeah.
Okay.
From just a practical, like, they can't get equipment in there, so are they gonna have to go in the river or something? I'm not quite sure how that will even work. Is that a constructability issue?
Yeah,
Do you have that concern?
some of them it's means and methods, so that's one of the things we wanted to kind of get from the contractor, and that's why we reached out to them so early on, and to talk with them about how will you be able to do this. Will you do it from the top, or will you go in the river? We have seen where they go in the river and do it, and puts like erosion and silt protection around where they're working. Some of the areas are low enough where they could probably do it from the top of the bank, but two of the areas are up quite high from the river, so it will be tricky.
And that doesn't need to be incorporated into the wetland permit now?
If it changes the design, it will. We have not submitted this permit yet. So when we talk to them, if we need to change anything in the design from a constructability standpoint, we can do that before we submit the application.
Okay, so this hasn't been submitted.
Correct.
But Paige, is it presented under the assumption that work occurs from the bank?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That's what we're doing, how we're planning it now.
So should you change it and need river access to do the construction, you would come back?
Yes. Yep. We wanted to make sure we incorporate all of your feedback as well, so.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, you would rather not be in the substrate of the river,
Yeah, exactly.
just in terms of sediment. And I assume that's what the river committee also had. I don't know if that came up with the river committee.
It didn't actually. They didn't mention that.
Okay.
I can read the comment if you want.
You want to read their comment?
It's up to you.
Sure.
I
Let's
just-
do that.
So Teresa Walker shared with Eben Lewis a statement that the Exeter Squamscott River Local Advisory Committee met with Paige Libby of Jones and Beach Engineers on June 27th to review the wetland permit application filed by Cobblestone. ERLAC does not support the work does not support the work proposed in the permit application. I should say ERLAC recommends the applicant complete a stormwater analysis for the entire property before initiating the bank stabilization described in the application. The plans filed with the permit application identify 3 sites where bank stabilization is proposed. According to Ms. Libby, the erosion at sites 1 and 3 are the result of stormwater runoff created by changes in the landscape after a water main failure. Little else seems to be known about the stormwater management on the property, and ERLAC believes an understanding about runoff from the sites is needed before bank stabilization plans can be designed. And then just to go on, I did clarify with Teresa that I was present to inspect all 3 sites at the time of failure, and it was very obvious there was, a gushing plume of water coming out that just daylighted on the riverbank, and so it was very obvious it was not stormwater, but it was in fact the water line. So I did share that with Teresa. And I do know that Don Clement had sent a a note of concern to Drew and I about this project, basically restating his concerns about homes in this proximity to the river. It sounds like that's something that you share, but again, we're considering the bank stabilization aspect of it. So what you want to recommend is up to you.
Yeah, and not to dispute what they said, but when I presented to them, I pretty much told them that the water distribution failure was what had caused it from my understanding based on what I've been told by the current owner, by Kristen, by residents of the park. They then asked me, could it be caused by stormwater? And of course, I'm not going to say, no, it's not stormwater, because stormwater can certainly cause erosion, and it can certainly contribute to added erosion if the bank's been sitting unstabilized for 10 years. So I'm not going to say no. But I didn't say specifically stormwater has caused the bank stabilization, just to clarify that.
Do we know if there's any active channel erosion right now just caused by the river?
In that area?
Yeah.
We haven't seen any in any other areas along the bank. So when we walked the riverbank along the park.
Erosion pins haven't been used or anything like that?
No, not that I know of.
And Paige, there are plans to go back to ERLAC, or I know I saw an email.
Yeah, they said we can
inquiring.
certainly come back and talk with them again. I want to make sure that whatever permit we file, they're comfortable with. So if they do have any additional feedback, I want to make sure we incorporate that. So I did reach out to Teresa and mention, do you think it's worth coming back now that they have that information from Kristen? Because she was able to send her email with a bunch of photos that she had, which I think will be helpful to them. And unfortunately, I did not have that before I went.
And I didn't include that in your packet. I should have, now that I think about it.
It's okay.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, doing something is better than nothing. And that, if that's the decision, but I could be.
Doing something right is better than doing.
But we also want to do something right. I agree. If you're gonna spend the effort, we want to do a fix that we think will work. And I'm certainly not an expert in it. Do we want to talk about maybe the trail down to the river? Is that a feature that will potentially reduce the chance of success of the rest of that segment? And are there other, I guess that's my question, is that access potentially detrimental to the stabilization of the surrounding area? And are there other access points that could be developed?
So there is one area, we were actually out there, there's a kind of a volunteer group with Fish and Game and New Hampshire Sea Grant that's been working with the park currently. It's called the Flood Ready Neighborhoods Group, and they actually planned a site walk along the river with the residents, which was really nice. And so just getting the residents' thoughts on what they'd like to see and things like that. And of course, the residents would love to have better access to the river because the park is up quite high from where the river is, so it's hard for them to actually get down to the river. But there were a couple of areas where some of the residents said, oh, this used to be accessible and is no longer accessible, and things of that nature. So there were a couple of areas that we saw that may be better suited to creating access. Our thought with this one was that we're already doing the work here to stabilize the bank, and we do have quite a bit of room between this river and the road in that area where there used to be units. So we thought while we're doing this permit, creating the access might make sense rather than filing a separate permit and creating additional impacts to create an access to the river. I believe there is one access within the park, but I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's like a formal access or if it's just a spot where residents have kind of created a path down there.
Mm-hmm.
So in my experience, access with living shorelines is tricky because it's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, again, working with communities and neighborhoods, you do want to, people want to get down to the water in a lot of these cases, and so you sort of want to funnel people in a way that you want. And I guess we can talk about the actual technicalities of the pathway as is envisioned in a second. But you also create these, like you're mentioning, these points of weakness. With the gabions, it might not be such an issue, but I'd also wonder if thought has been put into, how you'll make sure people stay off of the planted areas, off of the gabions themselves, because I'm used to dealing with like salt marsh and that kind of thing, and we know if you create a salt marsh and you plant it and then you create an access point, you really need to put up a lot of thought into like, how do people want to move, and making sure they don't step on things that you don't want them to step on. So I guess that would be one of my questions too, like how much thought has been addressed to this walkway specifically, what it'll be made of, how we'll make sure that residents aren't just sort of climbing all over the planted areas and just sort of keeping down the vegetation that we are hoping to really act as a stabilizing force of this shoreline.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I didn't think of doing like some kind of a barrier. You could almost do like posts with like a rope or something. Like it doesn't have to be a guardrail or anything quite that substantial, I don't think. So when we were thinking about it, I wasn't necessarily thinking they might start to walk over the planted area. So I think that's a really good point that we could consider.
Do you know what you were making it out of? Like, was it just sort of, yeah.
I realized once I submitted it that we didn't have a detail of what that was on the plan. I was picturing that it would be gravel, but I know that the commission is probably concerned with impervious surface. So we could just plant it and then have like a small little gravel path in the middle that people could walk on. It's not intended to be like, it's just basically a walking trail. So it doesn't need to be anything really, wide or anything like that. So, because obviously if people are constantly walking over vegetation, it's just not going to grow in. I do think also when you have a bank that's that high, the way that we've designed it is so that it's sort of terraced down the bank. So having a bank that high when you have a slope and then a flattened area and then a slope again, sometimes that actually helps because it slows any runoff down that's coming down the bank. So we'll often, if we have a very high bank in other designs, not even on rivers, but if we have a very high slope, we'll often do that intentionally to slow the runoff down.
So this is, it is close to McDonald, which is around the corner where we have a parking lot with river frontage access. But that would be across the street, and so that's maybe a quarter mile away from. It's a little bit of a walk from one area to the next.
Yeah, I'm not turned off personally. I'm not turned off by an access point close by, because I think that in a lot of cases people are going to get down to the water, sort of like water does, with using like just the path of least resistance, and you want to be able to control what that path of least resistance is.
Yeah.
So as long as this is thought out and clear enough that it's and engineered in a way that doesn't affect efficacy of the structure itself and the shoreline and doing more damage, it's well thought out. And again, not knowing what other points of access were talked about on those site visits, I'm personally okay having a place where community members can access the water, because otherwise they may be just climbing down on green infrastructure, which is generally not beneficial.
Yeah, the one access point that we did see when we were on the sidewalk, it wasn't really an access point, but one of the residents, I think, said that it was formerly at one time maybe an access point. It was quite steep and like through a wooded area, but then there was sort of a flat area down by the river that looked like it could be a good spot for sitting or, whatever people fishing, whatever people want to do down there. But the access to it was not quite, did not quite look easy to get down there.
I have more questions, unless anyone has.
Keep it going.
Unless, I'm moving away from the access point in case.
Yeah, that's fine. I
Okay.
think I'm in agreement with you in the access point. I'm for access, river access.
So there's changes in slopes in a couple of places. Can you tell me about, and especially section 1? I assume there's fill going into those slopes? It looks like you're raising that bank up.
I'm just gonna open this plan up because it's easier to see from here, sorry.
Sure.
So let's see, which area? Area 1?
I think, yes, this is area 1, right? Yeah, that one, on the one on the
Let's see,
screen.
44.
You're raising up the grade?
Yeah, so in some spots, because we're trying to flatten the slope off more instead of having it be so steep, but some of the material is just being moved around
Okay.
to create the slope, essentially. Like certain areas are being flattened off, and then some are, especially where we're adding the path. That area is currently a slope, so they'll basically be moving material around.
So you don't envision bringing in
I don't
fill?
think so, but that's a good question. We can run a cut fill analysis on it and see if it does result in fill, but I think we did try to balance it on this one. So, because if you look at some areas, it'll be actually lower than what is on the existing condition.
What else, Trevor? You got more. Come on. Keith, do you have any comments, questions?
This area 1 is almost a natural switchback. There's a plateau here where the access point is. Been here many times. It's not quite as steep at this area as it is in others. I don't think it would need fill. I think you could move stuff around this page set to make that work.
Okay, so just thinking about what we're doing tonight, we have to send what we're doing is we can comment on this permit application to the state. We're not actually issuing, or the planning board is not issuing a conditional use permit for this. So we're not actually talking about the wetland buffers like we usually do. We're just submitting comments on this proposed application to the state for them to review. So, but you haven't submitted it.
That's correct.
So we can also directly make comments to you, I guess, if we have any ideas about significant alterations. I guess our comments, you could take them.
Yeah. So any comments that you have, we can certainly take them and amend the plan, and then if your comments also go to NHDES, that way when they get our plan, they'll see that many of them are already addressed. That would work.
Yeah, how would that, usually we're reviewing these after they're submitted. So we would you would notify us that you've submitted it, and then we would have to submit our letter after the fact.
I think it's okay if you submit, I mean, you can.
You
answer
submit
to
it ahead of the time?
Yeah, I mean, we'll reference the map and lot, so I think it'll, and the address, so it'll match up.
Okay, I get bogged down
Yeah.
in these logistics
Yeah.
here tonight.
Yeah. It won't be the first time we've submitted comments before we have the permit number identified or any
Okay.
submission date.
I guess the things that I've heard tonight, and just in terms of feedback, is consider moving the units closer to the river, to the erosional area, so as to allow for work from the top on, is that site 3?
Site 2, I believe.
2, site 2.
Do you want to open it up for public comment?
Do. Let me just finish my thought though. And then, did we have any other comments on these other 2 areas?
Are we going to include what Kristen said and, you know, the fact that she had some history with what happened there?
I'm not sure how that changes the
Okay.
proposed action moving forward. It
Okay.
sort of informs the need for this, I think, but
Okay.
I don't know. I'm
That's
open to
fine.
ideas.
That's fine. Just a question.
Okay. Does anyone else here have any other comments? Yes. So why don't you come on up and introduce yourself?
I'm Susan Hansen. I'm in a butter. Could I have the map of Area 2 up there? No, then it's going to be that one. No.
Which one?
It's the one that does Canterbury Drive, I believe. This one is.
That's on the corner of Canterbury.
All right, well, it's farther in then.
Maybe the overview map.
That one.
Yeah, there you go.
That one there. Okay.
Can you take the mic with you? I just ask that you speak.
Kristen's on it.
Hold on. This is my property right here. Right. Thank you.
Just for the listeners at home.
Okay.
They don't want to miss this.
We don't want to miss this, right. This is my property right here. And I was down there yesterday. The mobile homes are like on a man-made cliff is what it is. And anything you do on that man-made cliff affects my property and anybody else on the opposite side of the river or upriver. This floods regularly because this is all blocked off by essentially the man-made cliff, which is a dam. And it goes right up the river. The only difference with anybody else that's on the river is we don't have our mobile homes next to the river. So what you're doing to stabilize that bank is really affecting the wetlands, which the actual wetlands on the opposite side and upriver. And the river does move pretty fast there, depending on the rainfall and everything else. One other thing I was curious about, I saw that there's a retaining wall, and I believe it's somewhere in here. And I think that's kind of peculiar to wetlands, to have a retaining wall. So the mobile homes are really close to the river. And they're way up there, way up there. And the rest of the riverbank is not. It's because it's been all filled in. So it does affect everybody else upstream.
So are you not supportive of the trying to stabilize the bank next to your property?
I would be more supportive of removing the mobile homes that are on the bank so that it can be stabilized in a more tapered area. Because the way it is now, and even with your plan, everybody upstream is still going to get flooded. And everybody on the opposite bank is going to get flooded too. And I lost some of my best hayfield because those banks were put in and everything floods.
When were they put in?
Over 40 years ago, maybe. 40 years ago?
Hmm?
Yeah, maybe 2 owners ago. who, they would never have gotten a permit, I believe, to do that now. So and that's what happened.
So this peninsula area you're saying is fill?
Pardon?
Do we think the peninsula area is the eroded material in that area too? Does it look like a natural material, or is it now that's fill that's being exposed?
I don't know the answer to that.
Do you want me to answer? I don't know
Yeah.
if I should speak or if I should get the microphone. Go.
You can take turns. You can get up there and then
Yeah.
answer my question because it's relevant to her comment.
Yeah, so there are quite mature trees in that area. I don't know the entire history, so I don't know if maybe 40 years ago there was fill put in. So unfortunately, I can't answer to that. But I do know that it's been the way it is for quite some time. And I think to her point, probably whatever they did, if they did anything, would not have been permitted today. But it's certainly been that way for a while, before even maybe the previous owner owned it. So we did get a little bit of the history of the park from some of the residents that have been there for quite some time. Apparently it used to be a campground, and there's a lot of history to it. So.
Okay, but you're not seeing sort of material like bricks or rubble in the eroding bank that's now going into the river?
No, there's no evidence of that.
It looks like a natural sands till. I don't know if you can describe I don't know if any geologist has been out there that looked at what the materials are.
No, I can pull up some photos though. So these are some photos. It's a little hard to see. Photos really don't do it justice. But that's the area. So you can see there's some trees, and it really looks like just undercutting of the tree roots. It doesn't, to me, look like fill, but we don't have any geotechnical data on the soils there.
I believe it was gravel because I saw all the trucks going by my house down there to fill it in, and there was a pit across the street, and that's what they did. They filled it in.
40 years ago.
Probably, yes. Yes. And I think they just kind of kept on going and going and going.
So you're talking about the end of Camelot?
I believe so. I'm only on my side of the river. Yeah. But it's a pretty good cliff.
Paige, is there any requirement to do some sort of FEMA analysis, or you're not encroaching into the? Yeah, sorry.
You can
it's
just
kinda
put it down.
Yeah.
Like a HECRAS study?
Or you're not encroaching into the floodway. So.
Correct. Yeah, we're not.
Okay.
So we're not resulting in more fill in the floodplain. And for that reason, we don't have to do a HECRAS study or anything like that. And that would be what would sort of evaluate the things that she's talking about, like how this fill will impact her property, essentially. Because to her point, it is true that let me go back to the plans. Not just in the area over here, but also all along here is much lower than the park. So that sort of acts as the natural floodplain. The park is up much higher. And while they have had flooding events in the past, like I've heard stories about the Mother's Day flood and things like that, they've had some significant, when there's significant flooding, they've had some flooding, but the floodplain mainly is across the street because it's so much lower in that area.
And not to talk specifically to this property, because not knowing the history as well, but I mean, some of that, it does have to do with just the natural mechanisms of a river, right? Like that's where the floodplain is located on the inside of the bow. You're going to have your higher, steeper banks with the higher erosion on the outside of the bow because there are faster water currents on that side. And when you have large amounts of water coming through, it's going to, again, try to cut across just the most direct path, which is, again, on the inside. So that's just sort of how rivers work.
Yes.
Yep.
However, this is man-made. That riverbank is man-made because I don't believe any other place along the river would be that high.
Possibly, and I'm certainly not here to argue with you
Yeah, but I think
about that.
a lot of it's man-made.
I would, and I don't know what we can do about that.
I know.
Unfortunately,
Yes.
I guess it's sort of what we come down to.
We're stuck.
We're sort of, even if it was or if it's not, we're kind of at a place where there's houses up there. We have a project in front of us about bank stabilization, and we're dealing with sort of natural mechanisms of a river. So, while I certainly have, I feel for you on being on the other side.
It's not just me.
Yeah, no, everyone on that side of a river.
On the opposite side, and everyone would be upriver to the Crossroad Dam.
If it were up to me, I wouldn't put any kind of permanent structure near a river at all because rivers like to move. Rivers naturally just shift all over the landscape. They flood, they create oxbow lakes. Like, we shouldn't build houses near rivers, but that's also not my decision, and it's not the decision of this board. I think while I completely respect and thank you for coming up with the comments, I think we should probably get back to the discussion at hand about the erosion issue, if that's all right with you. And again, all due respect.
Do we need to see if there's anybody else? I don't know.
Yeah, are there any other comments or questions that have come up? Okay. Does someone want to form a motion? Trevor?
It'll be a doozy one. Good luck, Trevor.
I mean, so I would motion sending a memo to the state indicating that we've reviewed this application and have no objections to the application as proposed.
Yeah, I think the only thing that was discussed was moving that trailer back, which I don't know if we even have
Authority?
jurisdiction on.
Jurisdiction.
The only, maybe we add the one other thing, which was the access point is creating a mechanism to limit.
Yeah, it would be nice to have that.
The foot traffic to only that area,
Yeah, I would amend my motion to include that.
either through signage or some sort of barrier, or both.
I second that if we're.
Second that. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, I guess we'll vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so I believe that that motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along, we have a minimum impact expedited wetland dredge and fill application. This is, that's the state permit similar to what we just reviewed. But this also is a wetland conditional use permit, which is Exeter, our Exeter local permit for the associated with the construction of a residential driveway for a new single-family house at 24 Powder Mill Road. I'll just note that we had a site walk at this location at 5 p.m. earlier today, so thanks for sticking with us tonight.
Pleasure.
Do you want to introduce the project?
Sure. My name is Dan Coons. Company is Ilex Wetlands Consultants out of Wolfboro. as a, I don't know if it's a correction or not, but I think originally, had this happened last month, you'd be reviewing the wetlands permit and the conditional use permit, but during the intervening time, DES for...
the wetlands permit's been approved.
Wetlands permit's already been
So we
approved
are-
by the state. So,
We're just doing the conditional use permit.
surprising to me, I don't know how that happened, but
Okay. Thank you for that correction.
DES decided to approve it. The property in question is this 5-acre parcel labeled on this plan as Lot A. This is a subdivision off of approximately a 20-acre piece in total. The intention is to build a single-family dwelling on this property. It is the daughter and her family of the owners of the larger lot. So this is subdividing off of her parents' property to build their single-family dwelling on here. I walked into this at the most of the way through the process, but the original delineator who came out and did this lot for the original subdivision wasn't able to be contacted, so I was hired to finish up the application for them. So we submitted the original application as part of the subdivision. Whoops, that was the wrong button, but it still works, I guess.
The pointer's at the top.
At the top?
Yeah.
Okay, so as part of the original subdivision, a right-of-way easement was put across the remaining 15-acre parcel that was going to give access across the upland that avoided any buffer impacts to get to the new building site. I was called out there a month or so ago with the ask from the landowner to see if it'd be possible to only run the driveway in from the road in approximately this location. Instead of using the right-of-way easement, I expected to go out there and tell them that, no, the least impacting way would be to use a right-of-way easement, and then I came out and found a wetland that was totally blocking that right-of-way easement. So faced with wetland impacts on either way, it became obvious that the buffer impacts would be much less coming in from the road than from the right-of-way. So we are requesting a conditional use to access the building site up in here on a knoll, septic right about in here, from a driveway that is outside of 40 feet from the wetland. So outside of the buffer as much as possible. That would be buffer impacts related to wetland that parallels the road in that location. So.
I have a couple for you. I guess I'll pull with Trevor in this one. Do we have the numbers for if we use the, I know we had a sidewalk and I realized it's only been an hour or so. Do we have the numbers for wetland, we'll say wetland impact if we did use that right-of-way easement versus the proposed coming right off Powder Mill?
Sure. Using the right-of-way, the wetland impact would be approximately 720 square feet. Coming in off of the road, it is, I've got 624, so slightly less. The buffer impacts using the right-of-way, I've got 2,240, and coming in off the road, I've got 1,040.
Thank you for having those numbers handy. So it does seem like significantly less buffer impact coming off of Powder Mill, if that
Correct.
was that was the correct numbers I heard.
Yeah, it's because we're only doing kind of like a one-sided buffer rather than a two-sided, because of the wetland on the right-of-way goes kind of up the middle, so we'd be having 40 feet on both sides of that.
And I know this isn't our purview, I guess it's more curious. Are we, when this was subdivided, did we have a proposed coming off of Powder Mill? Or do we need approval for that from planning board?
I think when the planning board approved it, it was coming off of the right-of-way.
The easement, we go back Thursday.
Yep.
You go back Thursday. Okay. Anybody else I can keep?
You can get more.
Feel free to stop me at any point here. I guess what I am struggling with a little bit on this one, and just coming from the wetland industry, is I don't know how else to say it other than it just seems convenient that when nobody wants a shared driveway, I agree with that. When we went out to further investigate that shared driveway, see if we can come off Powder Mill, we did find a wetland that increased the size pretty significantly, in my opinion. I agree it's through a field. Fields are very tough to delineate. I'm not saying that they're easy by any means. I just struggle with a little bit of trusting a plan that's been stamped 3 times with 2 different CWSs and 2 different wetland delineations. I don't know what the solution would be for that other than a third-party review, but I agree that right now with these plans, the minimal is clearly off of Powder Mill as the numbers explained right then and there. I don't know if the board wants to discuss anything further about that. It seems kind of a cut and dry project besides that point. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess my observation, and you can't tell it from this site plan, is it is the large open wet meadow that we are in.
Yeah, I didn't know that until the site plan.
Yeah,
That it was a field.
Besides there's a forested buffer which is shown at the little squigglies there, but it is a giant field that part closer to Powder Mill, which is lower, seems to be what I've heard other people call wet meadow. I'm not a wetland scientist, but it's parts are dry, parts are wet, so it did seem like it was very hard to delineate in any extent. So I don't know what the best way through it is, whether it may be 6 of one, half a dozen of another.
Right. Right. 2 subjective opinions, kind of.
Yeah.
It is a wet meadow.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of or it's a description of it. If you looked at the dictionary of a wet meadow, it'd have a picture of the lot, so.
Yeah, I guess I share the concern though, if that isn't, what's described doesn't convey that in terms of the direct wetland impacts. If it is a wet meadow, should that, I mean, to me, when you look at the map, there's sort of the wetland along the road and then another area, but I got a different sense when I was out there today, so. I also don't know how to move forward with this. They need a way to access the parcel.
Right.
I understand the direct access may be the shortest driveway. It may be preferable for them, so does it matter? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's just what I was posing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, generally, I feel that when we can look at one of these plans, it's pretty easy to just do the math on it. You're saying, what's the minimum amount of wetland and buffer impact? And you just see the numbers, and you gave us the numbers from the two proposed. But that's also under the assumption of what's on the plan mirrors reality. And I agree that going out there today at the site visit, I'm not sure that it does. I'm not sure that the new proposed driveway does mirror what is seen on the plan. And as you've mentioned on that visit, that area wasn't redelineated. And because of that, I'm not sure, and again, it might not amount to anything really, but I can't say for certain whether in this case, that is the most optimal path to the house. It might swing around the other, it might be right through, but I can't make that call with knowing that we were going through an area that was not only hard to delineate, but was wet at the time we did, so.
Well, I certainly agree that it seemed very convenient a month ago when I was out there, and when I met Kristen out there, I was totally amenable to having a site visit because I wanted the board to see what I saw when I was out there.
And I think we did too. I think I mean, you took us through the path, and there was a very obvious creek or something that basically we crossed over and said, oh yeah, I mean, this would be significant. This is not a straight right-of-way path over dry land. Like, this obviously gets quite wet. But even the grass, the red-headed grass that you were showing there.
Yeah, red top.
Red top. I mean, yeah, that sort of spread throughout into the area we were going through, and so I'm not quite sure where we go from here either. Knowing that we're sort of running with, we have a wetland permit that's stamped by the state, but we're talking on a CUP here, so I don't know. I'm just voicing my concerns.
Well, we are ultimately making a recommendation to not to get back to my logistics here, but I am going to, we're writing a letter to the planning board. I think our goal here is to craft some motion to the planning board regarding their issuance of a conditional use permit. So our role at the Conservation Commission isn't to issue the conditional use permit, but it's to make direct recommendations to the planning board, and they take what we say and they tend to run with it in general. So we're not, I guess I'll defer to Kristen, but we're not commenting to the state at this point, or is that still on the table?
I would say no. I mean, the permit's been issued by the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we're looking at what do we want to say to I mean, that's, to me, that helps us think about this. Is that a fair comment, Kristen, in terms of what we're doing here?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
A fair comment in terms of what the approach is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're making a recommendation to the planning board on a conditional use permit. So I guess just to kind of push back a little bit, what is your level of concern over the fact that the wetlands that are being crossed were not double checked before? Is that what did you say, Trevor? Say that again. Sorry.
Yes, I guess I feel that we're back at stage one, right? We have a driveway. It's going over what was assumed to be dry. We go out there, we find it's wet. And so in the first stage, that's what happened. And we said, oh, okay, well, we'll move it over here. This is now assumed to be dry. And we go out and we find it's wet again. So I don't know if we need another delineation of that area, or I guess I'm not really answering your question at all, but
I guess I'm just asking if that area was delineated by the current wetland scientist in front of you so that all impact areas had a current delineation, would you come to the same conclusion?
I don't know, because I don't know what that delineation
Right.
looks like. I guess that's
Okay.
what it really comes down to. I don't trust where it's delineated at the current moment on the plan. And because of that, I can't say whether this is the best path through that area. Whether or not that matters to the COP. But it is, right? Because one of the questions is
Well, the
whether we're
buffers are
doing
based
the
on
least
the
amount.
wetland.
Yeah, exactly. We're doing the least amount of damage to the wetland and the buffers, and right now I could say, I have no idea. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't.
Yeah. I mean, we can go through the conditions here, but part of it is that the use for which the permit is sought cannot feasibly be carried out on a portion of the lot which are outside the wetland conservation overlay district.
So there is the boundary appeal provision in the ordinance which says, in the event that the building inspector, planning board, or conservation commission questions the validity of the boundaries of a wetland area on a specific parcel of land, or upon written petition of an owner or any abutter of said property to the planning board, the board may call upon the services of a scientist qualified to delineate wetlands in accordance with the standards and criteria specified in, and then it references another section, wetland delineation in order to examine said area and report findings to the planning board for their determination of the boundary. Expenses incurred in retaining these services shall be paid by the landowner. I guess so that's what I was getting at.
I don't know if we need to go, yeah.
Was it just a double check by this wetland scientist, or are you questioning?
Well, I guess we can ask you directly. Do you need to redelineate based on what we saw in the field today? Do you want to redelineate and resubmit this application?
I'd be happy to. I think concerning that little wet pocket that I think we all found, right about in there, I think it probably would be good to go out and take another quick look at that, see if it warrants flagging as an additional wetland pocket.
Yeah, I guess my recommendation, maybe that's the path forward here, is to ask you guys to revise the plan and see if there's additional wetlands and then resubmit. I don't know.
Or in a different order. Find out if there's additional wetlands and then revise the plan.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there is like LiDAR topography, or there are lower areas within that field that naturally collect water. I'll acknowledge if we went out last summer and did this, we wouldn't have found any of that. It just rained a fair amount yesterday, so
Yeah.
It is a...
Their LiDAR maps, I have downloaded them, but they're at 2-foot intervals, and it's not going to show a 6-inch change in elevation, which is making
just
all the
what
difference
it
here.
is.
So.
Yeah.
So go to
Just come up to the mic.
I'm Chrissy. Because we're scheduled for the planning board on Thursday, if we go forward with the recommendation that you just laid out, are we out for that and we're pushed out again?
What are you reviewing on the access road? Or the
Subdivision and the conditional use permit.
Okay, both.
On Thursday. So I guess I would ask the question back, could you confirm the existing delineation by Thursday? Or, I don't know.
I believe so. Let me check my calendar.
So is that what it is? You're looking for a reconfirmation that what is submitted is accurate based on what you saw today? From?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just feeling so concerned as the payer of this at this point. We hired Gove to do this, and then we couldn't get them to finish the project. So we brought Dan in, tried to do the right thing when we were looking at this easement land, saying something doesn't look right here. This is much more wet than the direct access. We brought him back out. This is going on 18 months for us in permitting, and the costs are extraordinary. And I'm trying to build a house before my kids graduate from high school. I homeschool them. I don't want to put them in Exeter schools, but I would really like to let them grow up by my grandparents. And I'm trying to find a way to get through this that is not going to push us out farther and farther and farther. So
I do understand that. It's highly unusual for this board to review a wetland plan where the wetland scientists before them didn't do the delineation.
Completely agree. I wish that we could all go back and we could have started with Dan from get-go.
Outline where both bodies are.
But it seems so far that we wetland flagged in November, and then we redelineated in April, and we walked today, and it looks different every single time you walk the property based on the rain that just happened. So if he came back in another month or two and it's been dry, are we then back where we started?
And that's why we defer to wetland scientists and their delineations, because it's 3 criteria. It's not just water present, right? It's plants, it's soil, and hydrology. So it's all 3 of those conditions that are required, and all 3 of those don't change day to day.
So yes, I can get out there before Thursday. If the plan has to be revised, it won't happen by Thursday evening. So.
How do we help these people?
Well, we've been to 2 zoning.
To zoning, then we went to planning, we got sent back to zoning, we got approved again, we went back to planning, we're here, we're trying to do this the right way.
Trying to do it
This is
without-
costing us a fortune, and it's taking forever.
I mean, I'm sympathetic to that. But I also, this is new to us that we've like gone on a site walk and not felt comfortable with the wetland delineation. So that's also, we can review the plans. I agree. The proposed driveway into the site makes sense from a 10,000 foot level. We could, this is ultimately the planning board's. I'll defer a little to the planning board.
That responsibility on them. Yeah, I don't see too much from my end either. I'm sorry, the permitting process, yeah, it sounds like you haven't been so lucky. But as far as our wetland scientists, wetland review, I wouldn't mind a second visit.
How long would that set them back?
Potentially not at all.
Potentially not at all if I'm convinced that it isn't a wetland, that it is just temporary flooding condition that causes the hydrology but hasn't changed the soils or vegetation, then it may be fine to go through on Thursday. Cross our fingers.
So how do we fashion something
Yeah, it reflects that. And you stamped the most recent
Yes.
plan with
Yep.
the finger?
I guess I'll motion that we craft a memo to the planning board describing that there was potentially additional wetlands not shown on the plan that were observed during a site walk, and we've asked for that area to be reviewed. And if that area is determined to be a wetland, then we would not be supportive, or we would need to review the proposed plan to confirm the design is the least impactful. If no additional wetlands are determined, we are supportive of the conditional use permit as proposed on the existing plan. I mean, does that's sort of the two cases as I see it?
Yes.
I agree. So if you go out Thursday, and I'm just wondering, as a committee, can we appoint a person from our committee to review it, or do you want to come back before the whole committee again? How does that work?
In my opinion, with the CWS,
Yeah.
none of us are certified to.
Okay.
Sometimes what's helpful is we can go, one of us, I don't know if I'm available on this Thursday, but sometimes it's useful for us to attend a planning board if there's a controversial project. Not that this is a controversial project, but there's an issue here we're trying to work through to provide them context for any comments we provide them. That is something we've done and is a good way to interact with different boards in town to smooth out permitting process issues like this. And it's good to see what the planning board does, period.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out what happens Thursday. So there's a go, no go on Thursday then?
So it sounds to me like you have requested the certified wetland scientist to go back out and confirm the boundaries that
Right.
he adopted from a prior certified wetland scientist.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
So he's confirming another wetland scientist's boundaries in an area he had previously concerned.
Right.
So if he can confirm those, it moves forward with your recommendation.
Okay.
If there's a change, you want to see the application again. Is that
That was
Yes.
what I stated,
in order
I
to
believe.
determine,
Yes.
yeah, it meets the criteria? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you need to see it again, or would you recommend that the planning board make that decision that the revised plans have the least impacting method of ingress?
Regardless, that wouldn't be available Thursday, right? You wouldn't be able to get them revised plans on Thursday?
Not unless I do them myself, so. Most planning
And they
boards don't
meet.
like that, so.
How often do they meet?
They meet every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks. So then it would be, you would be looking for the,
But they have,
I think they have CIP at their second meeting this month.
yeah, they're busy. All right, so the motion has been made, but it hasn't been seconded. We're still considering that. No pressure. We can sit with this for a minute.
Yeah, so let's go through a hypothetical. Say you go out and you say, yep, you know, there's definitely a wetland that runs through this newly proposed driveway. What then, right? I guess some of it comes down to, again, just basic math impacts. Or a redesign. In either case, we probably want to see it again, I assume.
yeah, and I was just doing some quick math. It would add 2 weeks to the schedule.
No, I would say more.
You would say more?
The second planning board meeting, I believe, is reserved for CIP, so.
Yeah, so then the next one would be August 10th.
It's 24th. If we don't get it Thursday, we have to come back on the 24th.
Oh, they don't meet twice a month?
They
I
do,
guess-
but
Wow.
I don't know what the schedule is.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair. So
You've been told, yeah, yeah.
24th.
Thursday.
So then we would have a chance to see it regardless then,
What, our August meeting?
with our August meeting.
So say that whole area is wetland. Then it would make more sense to come in off the existing driveway. Is it that simple?
Yes. Yeah.
It might be.
That's what we're trying to
It might
decide.
be,
If
but
it
the
adds-
buffer impacts
Right.
still might be less coming in off of the road if it's moved.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's 1,000 square
Exactly.
feet to work with, so it's almost twice going, well, it is twice going in one way versus the other, so provide some leeway.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's where the problem is. Usually it's basic math, and right now I feel like I'm dealing with an unknown number, so.
But it does, is there a point to this?
Yeah.
Probably not.
All right,
But-
why don't maybe we just say we don't. We ask for the, I don't know. I'm struggling with this.
Yeah, I hate to hold these folks up more.
Yeah.
Based on,
Yeah.
you know, 24
An academic
24 days
exercise.
of rain last month and then a bunch of rain this month. And, you know, I realize there's plants and there's other formulas to it, but it's my take.
I totally agree, and I think in this, and that's really what I'm struggling with. With this project, it's not this one, but it's a precedent set too. Like, I've never come across a situation where I haven't trusted what was on the plan. And because of that, I don't want to set something going forward where I feel unsure, but I want to be able to shepherd things through either. Like, I want to be able to, if I'm putting a stamp on something, I want to know that I feel confident in what I'm doing.
Right.
And I mean, it sucks that we're working on a really short timeline here for what might amount to be nothing. But at the same time, I don't want this coming before me again where I'm like, oh, yeah, I have no idea if what this option is actually true or not. And I think that's really where I'm struggling here. So that said, yes, I think if a delineation can be done on the short term, that is great. If it turns out that you still stand by that, I have no problem with this going to with the CUP. Yeah. If it does, then I would recommend seeing it again. unless it turns out that, in the,
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I would just
I think that's
yeah.
fair too.
Okay, so that's what we said. That's what I tried to say, but we're
A while ago.
coming around.
That's what you said
Okay.
when you motioned.
All right. So that's still the standing motion.
so what is it again?
Yeah, let's review it.
So we're writing a memo. That is requesting that if there's an added wetland as determined on the site, that we have an opportunity to review it, review the application. Otherwise, we don't have any objections to the approval of the conditional use permit.
And you can do that by Thursday.
I can get out there and I can redelineate by Thursday, yep.
So,
I think that's a fair ask.
okay. All right, so that's what we'll craft in the motion. Let's see if I can be available on Thursday to the planning board. But that needs to be seconded.
I can second that.
Okay. Are there any other comments? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that motion passes. We'll work to probably, because we have to do this tomorrow, to get a memo. Okay. All right, thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Okay.
On this one,
Thank
and
you.
we'll be in touch with you. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Do we need a stretch break? 7th inning stretch break?
Keep on going.
If anyone
Yeah,
needs to
let's-
stand up, you can stand up. You don't have to sit in the seats.
Keep going.
Yeah.
We have momentum.
We have momentum? We do. Wow. All right. We have 2 more items tonight. Thank you guys for being patient here. Up next is a minimum impact expedited wetland application for the Epping Road expansion. Mr. Peter Walker from VHB, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm a poor substitute for Pete Walker. Kristen
Okay,
knows
sorry.
Pete, sure, yeah. Pete is one of our directors of environmental services. I'm a lowly transportation engineer, so
Okay.
I'm going to have to
Well, welcome.
sit in. Greg Backus from VHB. I'm the project manager
That's
for the
right.
project. Yep. And I've been working closely with Paul Vlasic on this project
Okay.
for the town. This is really kind of a do-over or an extension of a previous project that we came in with about 5 years ago when we put in the traffic signal at the Continental intersection and widened the road to include turn lanes on Epping Road. So
Yeah,
what
I
we're doing
remember
now is extending the Epping Road center lanes further north up towards the interstate. It's the same concept. We're doing widening on both sides of the road, and we are adding sidewalks on both sides of the road. So there are fill impacts on both sides, but they're relatively minor. I think 886 square feet of permanent impact and 700 something of temporary impact. And it's kind of sprinkled along both sides. The types of wetlands that are being impacted are a combination typical roadside ditches or slightly bigger areas in a couple spots. We are trying to minimize impacts by using stone slopes to pull in the slopes and stabilize them. We're improving drainage because we're adding sidewalks, we're adding curbing. And by adding curbing, you have to collect the storm water in the roadway. Today, it just runs off the sides. So we're directing that stormwater in the directions that it currently goes anyway, mostly to the east. As shown, there's a big wetland system to the east near Continental. So the project is a town project. There's no state involvement, and we are seeking that expedited approval. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the plans, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And the purpose and need really is twofold. It's to improve progression, traffic flow down the road, but it's also a very high safety component. Today, what's happening without the center turn lanes, you have difficulty getting out of the side streets because of all the constant flow, especially during the peak hours. It's hard to find a gap. And it's also hard to get into those side streets if you're taking a left to get into them. So the center turn lane, the dual-use center turn lane provides that refuge area in the middle of the road that makes it a safer system. So I think we're here tonight to actually have you sign these so that we could hand a bunch of them to the town clerk and then deliver one to DES tomorrow, if possible. So.
If I can chime, sorry to first here.
And trust our wetland flagging.
Yeah, that one won't be a discussion here. I have a couple questions. I think some of them are fairly straightforward and easy. I just haven't read all of this, to be honest with you. Schedule. Are we hoping to do that this summer?
At least started the season. We've already given the plans to a contractor.
Okay.
He's doing pricing right now, and the hope is that once the permit is in place, we'll be able to get going. Yeah.
So that leads into my second one. I see rare plant survey mid-June to mid-July was the flowering period. Do we know if that was completed?
It is 90% complete. We're still completing the consultation. There is an iris that is of concern. And our people have gone out there and evaluated the plants. They don't feel that it's not the species of concern is what they've found out there. But speaking with them this morning, it sounds like they just need to close the loop with DES on that, or DHR. Yeah.
Same thing.
And there's no bats, by the way.
I was just going to ask that as well. So you got a no effect as well.
Yep.
And so this is a sidewalk, there'll be sidewalks to the new gateway area?
Yep.
And to the mobile station?
Correct, yeah. Mm-hmm. There is one small break in the sidewalk due to a property owner who just happens to have a piece of right-of-way that juts out into the existing right-of-way, and the town has been unable to close a deal with him to have the sidewalk cross about 50 feet of property. So there's a small gap right now, but that hopefully will get closed. Yeah, on the east side.
And is there retaining barriers on the southern side?
There's guardrail.
Guardrail. That's what I mean. Guardrail.
Yeah. From Continental, there already is.
Yeah.
And it terminates at Ray Farmstead Road.
Yep.
And then there will be a little bit beyond that as well, because we're putting in steep slopes to retain this, to minimize the impacts. We have to put some guardrail for safety. Yeah. So that will extend actually closer to the mobile station on that side.
And so again, here we're not talking about buffers, we're just talking about direct wetland impacts. The impacts are just these drainage ditches along the road, so there's very low value in terms of wetland. Mm-hmm. And they're being replaced. You are adding stormwater management. What are those structures?
Yeah,
and what's the treatment on those?
Right. We're extremely limited on our ability to do treatment. We're putting in catch basins in the roadway and then directing it to either a swale that runs along the toe of the slope for treatment of some type. And then there's also an existing detention basin in the next sheet over at Ray Farmstead Road that we're expanding to detain more water. But other than that, it's really difficult. We're going to put in deep sumps in the catch basins, but we have high groundwater, so we really couldn't take advantage of infiltration.
In that ponded area, is that the pond?
It's actually on the bottom left there. That's actually on town property.
Okay, there's one of the areas.
Yep. And then a small one to the right of Ray Farmstead. But you can see on the right the cross-hatching that shows the riprap or the stone slopes. It's actually forming a V-ditch so that the drainage swale will flow towards the north. And I think just by way of having that swale, you'll have infiltration, and it'll be extremely flat swale, so there'll be some settling time, that sort of thing. But like I said, we're really, within the right-of-way, we're really constrained as to what we can do for treatment.
Because the town doesn't own any land.
Right.
So if you, and you don't typically get easements for that type of thing, that would project cost.
Yeah, it can be either difficult to get, or it's not conveniently located from a, stormwater outlet perspective, and we did not find, good opportunities for that.
Okay.
And these are commercial, the ones on the west side are commercial properties.
All right. Well, any other comments? Again, we're not here to recommend stormwater management, really. That's not really our purview.
I would say
do you need an AOT permit for this?
We do not. We
No.
don't trip the threshold, right?
Okay.
It's a pretty small project. The total length is only 1,500 feet. Yeah. And we're just doing widening.
Okay. So does anyone, do you have any more comments?
I don't think so. I think I scrolled past the actual permit. So tonight you're asking us to sign the expedited.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So we can, I guess how it works for Valerie and Keith here, there's this expedited, so this shortens the review time for the town to get the state approval, because you guys are trying to do this quickly.
Yeah. Yep.
So it means we don't object to it, the application, and shortens their review. So hopefully they can get working quicker, is the idea. So, I mean, unless anyone has any reason not to, motion that I'll sign the expedited request wetland application.
Second.
Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Oh, okay, we passed. Oh, yeah, I can sign it right now.
Okay, yeah. I've got 5 of them, so we're ready.
Okay. I got a good, okay, let's get this pen going.
It's easy.
Perfect. Print name legibly. They still accept these paper? They still require it in paper? Why do they do that?
This is $400.
I work at DU.
Brendan.
I
I have a photo too, so I'm just going to throw this.
We've gone all paper in our program, but they're all electronic, but we still have paper that we don't know how. Drinking water.
You're a lefty, huh?
Lefty.
Never knew that about
Southpaw.
you until right now.
Watch out.
Yeah.
How does it move?
Okay, we did it. Thanks. Okay, our last item. We are here to discuss a conceptual project regarding a commercial vehicle storage area for Foss Motors. And we have Mr. Brendan Quigley.
Yes, good evening.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for being patient.
I've made myself comfortable out there. I didn't mean any disrespect.
None taken.
So yes, Brendan Quigley from Gove Environmental Services. And as you mentioned, we're here for a design review at an early stage of a project which is being contemplated by Foss Motors. Here with me also tonight is Tim Foss, and he can probably speak if you had any questions about the project, the nature of the project, although it's fairly straightforward. So I have a paper photo. I imagine everyone's probably familiar with the area. And the Foss Motors right before Hannaford, and just north of the reservoir. So you can see on the photo the lot and single building which makes up the current site. As Tim mentioned when we were talking before the meeting, that particular photo doesn't actually show too well how many cars are there if you've driven by it, like most of us probably do in this area. You see they have quite a few more vehicles on that lot, and quite simply, need more room. So this parcel just to the south is, I understand, was once part of the Sylvania property. I think there's been some changes. You can see that a good portion of it is essentially a maintained field, and that portion makes up the front part of. Whoops. Where's the pointer, Kristen?
The top one.
Okay. So moving to the concept plan up here. Well, let me back up for a second. Obviously, we're here in recognition of where this lies. So just north of the reservoir and Wheelwright's Brook, there's some significant shoreland coverage on the site. Pretty much most of the lot, except for a very small portion right there. So this area here, this represents the project, which I'm realizing now. This one has a little bit better color. It's the same thing. Essentially, a parking area out front, which if you've ever been involved in any of the projects for the auto dealers, that's an important aspect of what they do. It's both inventory, storage, and display. So that is situated up front with potential future building located, towards the rear. So there's also 3 small wetlands. There's three wetland impacts. These 2 essentially remnant created areas, during when the original site work was done. One of those lies, right at the edge of the maintained field, and then there's a drainage feature going down the north side of the driveway, and that impact would just involve essentially a small tip of that to allow access between the 2 sites without going out onto Exeter Road. So all together, what's shown here, wetland impacts total about 4,000 square feet. Likely a more significant topic for discussion, and we'd be most interested in your input on, is its location in the shoreland. The green here represents the 300-foot shoreland protection district, and the 150 in red there. And the back of the property, anything in white, is in this concept to be left alone. So that impact is fairly substantial in this concept. It was about 80,000 square feet of disturbance in the 300-foot shoreland overlay district. More than half of that is that maintained field up front that you can see when you drive by. The rest of it, roughly from here back, is a wooded area. So there is sort of a difference between the nature of the impact that we're presenting here. We don't have a lot of detail on stormwater management, but of course that would be incorporated in any kind of design, and I imagine would be robust in this location. And I think that goes a long way to mitigating some of the concerns shoreland-wise in this particular instance, as it's a public water supply. So with that, I think the project kind of speaks for itself. It's relatively straightforward, and I think we're really looking for comments and concerns that we can sort of take that back and discuss that amongst the design team. And see where we stand. We had a similar meeting with the planning board. They had, I think, fair to say, very limited comments and mostly deferred to this commission for input.
So just by way of reminder, because it's a conceptual discussion, no comments that you make tonight are binding. You won't be bound by any comments that you make, so you can feel free to share them, but you can have a different opinion when you see the final plans before you.
Can you describe, it's a slab at 30.5. Did you describe what that is? That something else, or this all just paved parking lot? I don't know.
That's so the way the concept is proposed for this discussion is that is a future building location.
Future building location.
And so I believe that's why it's actually noted as slab on the plan. But it is not, the intent is for for that to provide a space to build an additional building. Is right now with the number of cars and my understanding the number of cars that are moving through the dealership, not only they don't not have enough spots for the cars, but they don't really have a lot of indoor facilities for I imagine maintenance and office administration, that sort of thing.
I'm just not in favor of this proposal. That's my opinion right now. This area is a sensitive area. It's next to their Exeter's main drinking water source, and putting a large automotive parking lot in there doesn't sit well with me from a water quality, and the wetland impacts and the shoreland impacts. So I'm not in favor of this design and use at this particular location.
Yeah, I'll bounce off that one. I just exited out of it. The worst. So, I agree with that. To help this situation, I'm not sure if that's productive for this meeting. We can certainly try. I mean, I think the biggest thing would be to minimize it for me. At least keep a tree line of some sort. It's kind of hard to push out recommendations with a project of this scale, other than just saying, I don't agree with it, but.
Well, that's what we want to hear. I mean, we understand that it's not a binding decision.
I will tell you that all day long.
For better or for worse, we are here to get your input. The reason I pointed out the field versus the trees is because I suspected there might be some difference between those two areas as far as your feelings.
I mean, I get it. I certainly could envision a parking lot where there's a field easier than I can, because there's clearly the topography. It seems like there's quite a bit of topography.
Yeah, which is pretty
on your contour lines in the forested area.
Yeah, I would probably second that I don't really like it either. This is another committee member chiming in. Sorry.
That office space, is that a set design? Are those the dimensions on that?
Well, I think the quick answer is it's not a set design. I had hoped for Christian Smith from Beals to be here. He's committed at another meeting actually this evening. Maybe Tim knows more about the building itself is, as shown, is 22,000 square feet. But I won't say that that's a final design by any means.
I mean, it's so close to the reservoir. I mean, I'll acknowledge we struggled immensely with another vehicle, alternate vehicle, and we did ultimately go along with the Ford McFarland alternative site that's off of Holland Way. And we could look at what those, you might want to look into what those wetland impacts were. They were modest relative to this. I guess there weren't the shoreline. I don't believe there were the shoreland impacts. There were modest wetland, mostly wetland buffer impacts, and we went through several design iterations with them, and they were able to condense the parking. Like, that was one thing that got brought up a lot in those discussions was, what is your parking today? Like, how is it optimized? And is there opportunities for more density in your existing parking lot? I get it, you want more space, but I don't know what alternatives have been looked at in the existing space to maximize the use of that before developing an alternative site like this. That would be something that would be, I think people would want to review, whether it's the planning board or here, I don't know.
Yeah, that project was on a very different piece of property. I mean, I'm just looking at straight buffer impacts right next to the reservoir. I mean, it just doesn't, that's a tough one for me to swallow. And generally with projects, not like this, but generally with these kind of conceptual projects, we can sort of work around though, if this was pervious or if this was constrained a little bit, but right now it's just straight buffer impacts next to the reservoir, and that's sort of the flags that get thrown for me. I mean, I almost don't, the impacts to the wetlands themselves almost are almost less significant to me in some cases, because we've gone through projects where, wetlands like that, get developed over, those, and not really looking into what the conditions of those wetlands are and the size of them and all of that, but I think right now it's just the placement of what it is going in to where it's going is just, it's a hard pill.
What would you recommend? I know from my standpoint, we've been in town since,
Brendan, can you hand him the mic, please?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. My family's been in the town, the farmland, Wentworth Lumber, which I don't know who's been in town long enough to know what Wentworth Lumber is, but that's the Exeter Lumber. It used to be Wentworth Lumber. That was my grandfather's farm in his barn before they sold to Franny Wentworth years ago. So we've been in the area. We've just outgrown what we have. We used to be, not knocking it, more of a mom and pop type shop, and now we're the 4th largest dealer in New England. We're huge. Yeah. And we're out there playing with the biggest dealers in New England and going for number 1, which might turn some of you off. It's what I do for a living. I try to be the best, and we try to grow the most. We try to do it right, and I think we have a pretty decent reputation overall. We're just at our limits, and we don't want to leave the town of Exeter, and we've just outgrown it. We're bursting at the seams of the building. We have people doubled up in offices. For what we do, we're maximized. And our lot now, can you pull up the picture of our lot? And we have pavement to the edges of our lot because when we did it, we were allowed to do it. Right. And before the time. But our property line is the pavement. We're tapped. And for years we parked on, a little bit of grass on the hill, which is now our property, but was Osram's because they let us. I just don't know how to grow anymore. I've hit it. So I'm here. I need suggestions on how to grow. We bought this land trying to grow, knowing what it was up against, and hearing some of the things that other people wanted there, and we thought that it was doable. We obviously wouldn't have spent the money to buy it if we didn't think we could do anything with it. But what are your suggestions to do it? I know no one just wakes up and goes, "Oh my God, I want to see a parking lot." I get it, and I'm not numb to that fact. I get it, and normally whenever you get in front of a planning board, as soon as car dealer comes out, people go, "Oh," but we do a lot for the community. We do things. If we're growing, we're only going to do more. Sure. And that's how we are. And hopefully you guys know, hopefully we've had good experiences in the past or with people but we have to grow. And I'm responsible for a lot of families, and if I can't grow, I can't do better for their families. So I'm coming to you asking for ideas, and that's what I'd like.
Yeah, totally. And can totally respect that. From where I'm sitting, the purpose of that buffer, and especially that buffer, is to protect water quality that's getting anywhere near that reservoir. So in my mind, even the starter or even a conversation would be to show me that any water coming out of there is cleaner than when it started.
And there are ways to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's a step in the right direction.
I can't. Yeah, absolutely.
And I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think there's potentials for BMPs, and again,
I don't know
you
what
know,
BMP is, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Best management practices like a stormwater management.
Like if we soak stuff away from?
Yep.
What if we pitched everything?
It can be directional. There can be, and again, I'm not a stormwater engineer, so I don't want to go into it.
I understand.
But that's, for instance, the Ford project was one that we worked with them, thinking about different ways of integrating pervious surfaces and things like that. I don't know what's possible in that area. And again, I look at it as a very sensitive area because of the reservoir.
I mean, what's confusing about the reservoir is that the town owns and controls very little of the land around it relative to other areas. You look at Lake Massabesic, it's the source for Manchester's water, and they bought up all of the watershed, essentially, and it's protected. So I don't know what opportunities there are, and it would be an interesting opportunity, how can the town, and this would be someone besides us, would they be interested, are there opportunities for land conservation around the reservoir in other places? I'm almost thinking like some weird, this again, we're getting very conceptual here, so what other properties could be conserved adjacent to this? Are there opportunities to make other improvements in that vicinity? Maybe there aren't, but that type of sort of an offset could make this project more palatable.
So one of the questions, I guess, is, it sort of came up, is, I mean, are we sort of just pushing off the inevitable here? And I feel like you'd know that in how your business would expand, the capacity that it needs. Are we sort of just kicking a can down the road that you will need to figure out sooner rather than later?
I mean, if I grow this to a parking lot that I'm in a perfect world,
yes.
If I get this,
Absolutely.
will I grow it in 10 years?
Yep.
I highly doubt it. I think with that size of a parking lot, what would be adding to it and the creative ways that we park, I think we would be able to stay and maintain a flow of cars and a rotation of cars. And it's all inventory. It's same thing as a restaurant. You want to move the chicken 1 week, you want to move it.
Right.
We move cars, and so I think moving rotation and ordering correctly, which we've had to be very good at rotating our inventory because of how little space we have. I think we could grow very, very well from there with that size lot. I don't think we'd have growth with that. Is it possible someday? Yeah, I guess. I mean, if we became the biggest dealer in the country, yeah, I'd love that. I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. So.
Have you looked at other off-site areas? Like, I understand, could you do something smaller on this property and then obtain another off-site property where you actually are storing cars. It's just, environmentally storing cars, there are lots of places you can store cars. If that's really the goal, and that's not the 100% of your goal.
Display is the biggest part of it.
Display.
So if you came to buy a vehicle and all of a sudden they said, hey, I've got one, but it's 3 times away, and you thought, I don't have time, buddy, I'm out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or maybe.
But what if it's a minute away or something, and they?
I guess anything is possible. This is the land that we purchased. You know what I mean? So I'd like to. It's much better having land that we can touch and feel and being close to it. In a perfect world, that's how you want it. Are there places that do it that way? Yes. If you go into a city, they have storage lots all over the place and random areas. They're all chain link fences and this and the other thing. And then you have security cameras there. You have security guards there. But for us to maintain and safely maintain our vehicles without theft and stuff, I mean, to have it in the middle of the field somewhere, or let's say we bought a chunk of land on Holland Way and in the middle cut out 3 acres of trees and put it, you'd be having a 8-foot fence around it. You know what I mean? Because no one's there to watch it. And at least here, we have, the police are in our lots all the time. It's lit. Knock on wood, we haven't had theft. That question said it out loud. Now we're probably going to have theft. But we haven't. Other stores that have lots like that have lost catalytic converters. Just brings, as soon as you give an opportunity for something to happen, it happens. So I would prefer to have it all together for safety reasons. Plus, I don't have employees leaving the lot with cars and less people in and out. Overall, for me, I feel safer having it on the same property.
Yeah, I get it's preferable. Yeah, I guess it's trying to balance. Yeah, you're obviously you have some rights to develop land as a property owner, balancing that with the environmental impacts and the town's drinking water. Certainly you don't want to be one to impact the town's drinking water
Right.
either.
We've been in town, and we don't ever want to do anything to hurt this town.
Right.
That's why we wanted to come early to get ideas. Instead of coming in and going, hey, we want to do this, and you guys go, no. We'd rather get the ideas at the beginning so we can work with everybody.
Yeah, and by the way, definitely appreciate that too. Like I would do one of these every meeting if people want to bring, and you can, anyone that's listening on channel whatever or something like that. Yeah, I definitely appreciate coming forward and we can discuss this because I think better designs come before us after the fact too. And I guess just putting a cap on my thoughts with it. Yeah, this piece for me doesn't come down to, habitat value. Like there's some, but it's not connectivity. There's like we deal with a lot of different types of parcels. This one is strictly water quality. So I think the conversation starter for me would be, we have done everything in our power to preserve water quality here. And if you can show me that, then we can talk.
Right. Anyone else have any ideas?
No, I think I can just echo Trevor's. I agree. I don't think it's really a habitat or even a wetland kind of issue at this point. Surface water seems to be water treatment seems to be the biggest for me as well.
I just have to say I'm skeptical. Sorry.
And what, for what? And that's,
Just-
I don't mind.
Yeah, just because it is so close to the reservoir, and can anything really be done? I guess, honestly be done to protect with development there to protect the water. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm a tiny bit of a skeptic.
That's all right. I'm trying to come up with ideas to make it work, that's all.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
no, I don't mind that at all.
There is. It's for the engineers to convince you.
Right. Right. I'm not an engineer.
Yeah, and neither of us are. So we can't talk too much detail about stormwater, but there is a lot that can be done, notwithstanding some constraint that I'm not aware of. There are basins on this plan, and these might not, they're sort of down where you'd expect, downhill. And those might move, depending on what, we go back and discuss with Beals about, I circled it here and underlined it. That basically, if we're going to get anywhere, it's going to be a stormwater discussion. But also pointing out that at least some of this area that's shown as an impact, so this would be the 150 foot, is on this plan is just for grading, and actually some of it here as well. So that's just grading for a stormwater management. Point being is there is also a secondary opportunity to put that back into natural vegetation. And then there's vegetation continues the rest of the property line until you get to the access road, which kind of runs through here like that. So that's something we normally try to do, is do some sort of restoration, naturalization of the edges of a project. So I think that wouldn't be any different here, except maybe that would be more robust. I thank you for your comments, your input.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Any other ideas before
I don't have any.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
All right, we can wrap this up. This has been a bit of a marathon. We made it through our main items. Committee, do we have any? We're skipping committee reports. We just want to approve the minutes.
Yeah, we're skipping. Oh, yeah, you can do the minutes.
I read them, and there was one minor little typo that I can't find right now, so I'm going to motion that we approve them. It wasn't worth fixing even, really.
Yeah, I didn't notice anything.
Okay. So I'll motion we approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, those are approved. Anything else before we adjourn? All right, thanks everyone for their thoughtful comments tonight. That was a good, challenging meeting all around. So that was excellent. I'll motion we adjourn.
Yeah.
Anyone want to second it?
Seconded.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.